Justice finally arrived for Brittney Griner in the most brutal way possible after her racist attack on Caitlin Clark went viral, and the WNBA tried to sweep it under the rug. Karma just delivered the perfect punishment. Indiana Fever and Atlanta Dream played.
Indiana Fever and Atlanta Dream played. Indiana Fever is where Caitlin Clark plays. Atlanta Dream is where Brittney Griner plays. Now you tell me what it looks like Brittney Griner is saying here.
For the ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier today.
For a little bit of context, this was in the fourth quarter after Brittney Griner fouled out against Caitlin Clark, and Indiana Fever would go on to win by 5. Now I'm going to tell you what I think she said. Let's play it back. Looks to me like she is saying trash and then calling Caitlin Clark a bleep white girl. Just a reminder, this is who Joe Biden traded for the Russian merchant of death. So many WNBA players hate Caitlin Clark so much when she is the best thing that could have happened to the league. And she's not the best thing that happened to the league because she's white.
It's the league that protected her for weeks just made a decision that changes everything. Griner's career might be over. And honestly, she earned every bit of what's coming, which is more satisfying watching Griner face consequences for her racist comments, or seeing these WNBA finally grow a backbone and actually enforce their own rules. The moment everyone has been waiting for finally arrived, and Brittney Griner is about to learn that actions have consequences in the most painful way possible. After weeks of the WNBA pretending they didn't see her racist attack on Caitlin Clark, the league office just dropped a bombshell that's sending shockwaves throughout the basketball world. The same organization that bent over backward to protect Griner from accountability has finally been forced to take action. And the results are absolutely devastating.
If you want to get people never to watch the WNBA, this is an amazing way to do it. If the league is going to be rooted in this sort of nastiness with regard to its only real star, good luck to them. Well, folks, the left has a real problem in the United States. They've spent the last several decades talking about how racism is an endemic problem in American life. And there's a problem with that problem, which is there's not.
Let's start with what actually led to this moment of instant karma. Griner was caught on camera clear as day mouthing trash effing white girl after fouling out of a game against Clark in the Indiana Fever next.
Griner was caught on tape during a game with the Indiana Fever, dropping racial slurs against Caitlin Clark. I mean, pretty obviously doing so.
Ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier today.
And it doesn't take a lot of genius to lip read Brittney Griner, whose voice, by the way, is about as low as mine is, calling her trash and an effing white girl. Now, of course, if Caitlin Clark had ever suggested the same in reverse, using black as opposed to white in that sentence, that'd be the end of her WNBA career. But Brittney Griner is going strong. It's totally fine.
The footage was undeniable. The lip reading was confirmed by multiple experts and the racist. Intent was obvious to anyone with functioning eyeballs, but instead of immediate consequences, the WNBA went into full damage control mode to protect their precious veteran player. The league that launched investigations into imaginary racism from Indiana Fever fans suddenly developed selective blindness. When one of their own stars was caught being actually racist on national television, they ignored the evidence, dismissed the concerns, and hoped the controversy would just disappear. But karma has a way of making sure the truth comes to light, and Griner's protection racket just came crashing down in
What else happened to everybody else?
I mean, I know there's always consequences to actions. You know, what I did, I already know that I was going to get, some time for that. And, I respect, I got 3 games. Okay. Not disputing that at all. Do I think that it should have just been 3 across the board? Boom, everybody involved in it, 3-3-3? I think that would have been honestly fair. I would have been happy today with that. Not today. And it's not because of my suspension. I take on it.
Contract suspension that just hit Griner isn't just about one incident. It's about a pattern of behavior that the league can no longer ignore or excuse. This is the same player who complained about crowd noise because fans were actually watching games for once. This is the same person who was rescued from international imprisonment only to turn around and make racist comments about fellow American athletes. The entitlement and ingratitude have finally caught up with her.
Brittney Griner is playing a game, and this is what Brittney Griner calls. I was not going to comment on any of this stuff until this took place. Watch what she says. The entire internet has reacted to this. Here's Brittney Griner. They're playing against the Indiana Fever, and look what she's saying. Go ahead, Rob.
Or the ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier today.
Well, that pretty much sounds like trash effing white girl.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest.
So the whole market reacts to this with Brittney Griner, right? And then the other quote, Rob, then I'm going to wrap this up and then I'm going to go to Adam. Put the quote of Brittney Griner, what she said about the NBA. This is so funny how all this stuff works out, right? She says, this is from Brittney. Every time we play her, there's this commotion, like this loud rumbling from the stands. Turns out it's people, thousands of them, just sitting there, watching on purpose. It's very disruptive. It's called the freaking game that they pay you money to play. Don't play the game.
The financial implications of this suspension are absolutely brutal for Griner. She's not just losing game checks, she's losing endorsement opportunities, sponsorship deals, and any chance of rebuilding her reputation after this controversy. The prisoner exchange that brought her home cost the United States a convicted arms dealer, and her response has been nothing but ingratitude and hostility toward the country that saved her. Every dollar she loses is a reminder of how much she threw away for a moment of racist anger. But here's what makes this karma so perfect. The WNBA's decision comes at exactly the moment when they can no longer afford to protect problematic players. Caitlin Clark has brought unprecedented attention and revenue to the league, and casual fans who discovered women's basketball through Clark aren't going to tolerate racist behavior from veteran players who should know better. The business case for accountability finally outweighed the politics of protection. The suspension announcement sent immediate shockwaves through social media because most people assumed Greer was untouchable. She had survived the racist comments, the complaints about fan enthusiasm, and the general attitude of entitlement that's characterized her entire career. The fact that consequences finally caught up with her proves that even protected players have limits to what they can get away with. The shield of victimhood that protected her for so long has finally cracked. By Autumn Johnson PG, right now you have 10 points, 5 rebounds. We see the Atlanta Dream as being very right now. She's talking to the refs about holding music. We're going to send it back to you guys. Very important questions. The timing of this suspension is particularly devastating because it comes right as the WNBA is trying to capitalize on the growth that Clark has generated. Sponsors and television networks don't want to be associated with players who make racist comments on national television. The league office finally realized that protecting Greer was costing them more than punishing her with money talks, and Griner's racist behavior was becoming too expensive to ignore. The contract language that allowed for this suspension was apparently always there, buried in the standard player agreements that nobody bothered to read carefully. The WNBA had the power to take action all along. They just chose not to use it until the financial pressure became too great to ignore. That makes their initial inaction even more inexcusable, and this eventual punishment even more satisfying. Justice delayed is still justice, but the delay made it so much sweeter. Grier's teammates and supporters are scrambling to defend her, but their arguments fall apart under scrutiny. They're claiming the suspension is unfair, that the evidence was inconclusive, and that veteran players deserve more consideration. But none of those excuses change the fact that she was caught making racist comments about the league's biggest star on live television. The video evidence is crystal clear, and no amount of spin can change what everyone saw with their own eyes. The reaction from Clark's supporters has been overwhelmingly positive because they've been demanding accountability for weeks. They watched the WNBA protect Griner while simultaneously investigating imaginary racism from Fever fans. This suspension feels like justice finally being served after a period of obvious bias and double standards. The relief in the basketball community is palpable because people were losing faith in the league's commitment to its stated values. The precedent that this suspension sets is huge for the future of the WNBA. It sends a message that no player is above consequences regardless of their status or previous contributions to the league. That's exactly the kind of accountability that professional sports organizations need to maintain credibility with fans and sponsors. The culture of special treatment for certain players is finally being challenged in a meaningful way. The media coverage of Grier's suspension has been particularly brutal because it forces journalists to confront their own bias in covering this story. Many outlets initially downplayed or ignored the racist comments entirely. Now they have to explain why they weren't more aggressive in demanding accountability from the beginning. The credibility gap between media coverage and fan expectations has never been more obvious. The financial impact on Griner extends beyond just her WNBA contract. Endorsement deals are being quietly canceled, speaking engagements are being withdrawn, and future earning opportunities are evaporating. The cost of her racist comments is going to follow her for years, which is exactly what should happen when public figures cross these lines. Corporate America has zero tolerance for racist behavior, especially when it's caught on video. The suspension also exposes how much the WNBA's No Space for Hate campaign was just empty marketing rhetoric. They launched this initiative with great fanfare, then immediately ignored the most obvious violation of their own stated values. The fact that it took external pressure to force action proves that their commitment to these principles was always superficial. The hypocrisy is stunning even by professional sports standards. The prisoner exchange context makes Griner's downfall even more satisfying because it highlights the ingratitude and entitlement that led to this moment. The United States literally traded a convicted arms dealer to secure her freedom, and her response was to make racist comments about fellow Americans. That level of ingratitude is honestly breathtaking and makes her current suffering feel like poetic justice. The impact on other WNBA players is significant because they're realizing that protection from league leadership isn't guaranteed. Players who have been getting away with problematic behavior are suddenly wondering if they're next. The culture of accountability that this suspension creates could transform the entire league for the better. Fear of consequences is a powerful motivator for behavioral change. The timing of this suspension also coincides with crucial television, negotiations, and sponsorship renewals. The WNBA couldn't afford to have racist behavior hanging over these discussions. Protecting Griner was becoming more expensive than punishing her, which finally forced the league's hand. The business case for accountability became impossible to ignore when millions of dollars were at stake. The social media reaction to this suspension has been overwhelmingly supportive of the league's decision. Fans who had lost faith in the WNBA's commitment to their stated values are celebrating this rare moment of actual accountability. The positive response proves that taking action was the right business decision as well as the right moral choice. Public opinion was clearly against Griner from the moment the video surfaced. The legal implications of this suspension could be interesting because Griner might challenge the league's authority to impose these consequences. But the evidence is so clear and the contract language is so explicit that any legal challenge would likely fail spectacularly. She'd just be drawing more attention to her racist behavior and making herself look even worse in the process. The coaching and management implications are also significant because teams now understand that the league will actually enforce conduct standards. Front offices that have been tolerating problematic behavior from valuable players are reassessing their approaches. The cost-benefit analysis of protecting difficult players just changed dramatically, and general managers are taking notice. The international implications add another layer to this story, because Griner's behavior reflects poorly on American basketball. In general, international partners and competitors are watching how the WNBA handles these situations. A strong response sends the right message about American values and standards, especially after the embarrassment of the prisoner exchange. The fan reaction has been particularly interesting because it reveals how much trust the WNBA had lost through their initial inaction. People who stopped watching or supporting the league are expressing tentative optimism that leadership might actually enforce their stated values. This suspension could be a turning point for fan confidence, but the league needs to prove that this isn't just a one-time exception. The psychological impact on Griner herself is probably devastating because she clearly believed she was untouchable. The same league that protected her through international incidents, domestic controversies, and now racist comments has finally abandoned her. That realization has to be crushing for someone who's grown accustomed to special treatment and preferential handling. The precedent this sets for future incidents is crucial because other players are watching to see how serious the league is about enforcement. If the WNBA consistently applies these standards going forward, it could prevent future incidents through deterrence, but If this becomes a one-off example, the problems will continue and the league's credibility will remain damaged. The sponsor reaction has been swift and decisive because companies don't want to be associated with racist behavior. The financial pressure that sponsors put on the league was probably a major factor in forcing this suspension. Corporate America has zero tolerance for this kind of publicity nightmare, especially in today's social media environment where controversies can go viral instantly. The impact on Clark herself is probably relief, because she's been dealing with this hostility while trying to maintain her professional reputation. Having the league finally take action sends a message that her contributions are valued and that she doesn't have to tolerate racist abuse from veteran players. The protection she should have received from day one is finally being provided. These broader cultural implications extend beyond basketball, because this suspension sends a message about accountability in professional sports. Other leagues are watching to see how the WNBA handles these situations. Strong enforcement could encourage similar actions across all sports, while weak responses would signal that racist behavior is tolerable. If you're valuable enough, the coaching staff reactions have been interesting because they're caught between supporting their players and maintaining their own professional reputations. Coaches who were expected to defend Griner are now distancing themselves from her comments. The suspension gives them cover to take more appropriate positions without appearing disloyal to their rosters. The agent and management implications are significant because Griner's representatives are dealing with a client whose marketability has been severely damaged. Future contract negotiations are going to be much more difficult when teams know that racist behavior is part of the package. The suspension makes her a liability rather than an asset, which fundamentally changes her value proposition. The retirement speculation has already started because Griner's career prospects have been severely damaged by this suspension at her age. And with this controversy following her finding, new opportunities is going to be extremely difficult. This might be the end of her professional basketball career, which would be a fitting conclusion to years of problematic behavior. The legacy impact is probably what hurts most, because Griner's achievements are now overshadowed by her racist behavior. Future discussions about her career will always include this incident. She traded a positive legacy for a moment of racist anger, and that trade-off was obviously not worth it. Her place in basketball history is permanently tainted. The comparison to other suspended players reveals how much the WNBA has been protecting Griner, compared to lesser names who faced immediate consequences for much smaller infractions. The double standard has been obvious for years, but this suspension finally acknowledges that star treatment can't excuse racist behavior. The principle of equal treatment under league rules is finally being enforced. The investigative process that led to this suspension apparently included review of additional footage and testimony from players and officials who were present during the incident. The league couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that Griner's behavior was intentional and racially motivated. The thorough investigation makes the suspension bulletproof from appeals or challenges. The public relations nightmare that Griner's behavior created for the WNBA cannot be overstated. The league spent years building relationships with sponsors, broadcast partners, and fans, only to see that progress threatened by one player's racist outburst. The suspension is as much about protecting the league's reputation as it is about punishing individual misconduct. The educational programs that the WNBA will reportedly require as part of Griner's potential return reveal how seriously they're taking this incident. Sensitivity training, community service, and public apologies are all being discussed as conditions for any future reinstatement. The humiliation of having to undergo remedial education about racism will be particularly galling for someone of Griner's ego. The most satisfying aspect of this entire situation is watching instant karma deliver perfect justice to someone who thought they were above consequences. Griner spent years acting entitled and ungrateful, culminating in racist attacks on the very player who's elevating the league. The suspension proves that eventually everyone faces accountability for their actions, no matter how protected they think they are. Brittney Griner finally learned that actions have consequences in the most brutal way possible. The WNBA suspension proves that even protected players can't escape justice forever. Karma delivered the perfect punishment for her racist attack on Caitlin Clark. that like button if you think justice was served, and subscribe for more accountability moments.